So today we're talking about simplified, accountable structure. Okay? Now, it might have been perhaps single board model. You might have heard it referred to as that. Perhaps you have heard it referred to as modified or minimum structure. It just happens to be that my reference is simplified but accountable. And we're going to talk just as much about accountable leadership as we are simplified today. The typical church has the structure driving versus the mission of the church driving. And here's what I mean. If you talk more about money and calendar and building and how to maneuver through your structure to make decisions, you know that structure is driving your church. If perhaps you're having conversations to say, how are we doing at living out our purpose of making disciples, that is your compass, if you will. If that's the way we're making decisions, then mission is driving your church. But if we're making decisions around, well, I'm not sure, we just painted those walls, and if we have that event, some people might scuff those up. Or perhaps we spend 30 minutes of our time together as a council deciding whether or not we are going to replace the dishwasher in the parsonage. Structure is driving your church. Or if we spend all of our time continuously working on more and more policies and procedures, guidelines, rules. Look at your church. If every time you turn around you're saying, please don't do this and please don't do that, structure is driving your church. Write down on your handout, which one do you think is driving your church? Mission or structure? Just take a moment. So there is another way, and it's this simplified, accountable structure. Now, some of you, I know, probably have the Book of Discipline in your bag, or maybe it's still under your pillow. See, your district superintendent has his with him. So if any of you want to look it up, you're welcome to look at paragraph 247.2, and if it doesn't matter to you, I guarantee you it will matter to someone in your church, so just be prepared to be able to cite it, okay? Paragraph 247.2 allows you to organize the life of the congregation so that you can be more missionally centered, as long as you meet the Book of Discipline minimum requirements, all right? So this is our permission giving. Now, interestingly enough, this was put in the Book of Discipline originally for small churches. But do you know who were the first to adopt it? Large churches, because they saw the effectiveness and the efficiency in it. All right? So I need 5 volunteers. 5 volunteers. Just come on up. I promise it won't hurt. Okay? Just grab one of those signs there. One more. Okay, Denise, you're over there. All right. Now I'm going old school here. Did any of you used to have like name placards on your desk? Okay, y'all with me? All right. So these aren't names, but they're titles, right? So currently, we would have 4 different committees, all right? And our first one is council.
I didn't know.
Play along, Jack. Is our council or our board, right? So think about that. How many people, just jot that number down, how many people currently serve on your council or your board? All right? Next, we have trustees, all right? So how many are currently serving as trustees in your congregation? Okay? All right, the next administrative team we have is? Staff parish relations, okay? How many people do you have serving on that committee? All right, next one.
Finance.
Finance. How many folks do we have serving on finance? Add that number up. Now, this number would include some of the people from over here, but it would also include people at large, right? Members at large. Or sometimes it's everybody in the church. Okay? What's your number? Shout them out. What's your total number? 76. That's a large church. 17. And we're disagreeing on that number. Another number over here? 12. 10. 30. Most of the time, you have 30 to 40 people on average tied up in those 4 teams. At least. Minimum. All right? Now, when you meet as a trustee, what are we talking about? The facility. What else? Grounds. What else? Parsonage. What else? Legal stuff. Any kind of equipment. Maybe endowments. I know some of you are looking at each other, go, endowments? Endowments. All right. When we're with staff parish or pastor parish relations committee, what are we talking about? Personnel. Pastor. Salaries. Benefits. Problems. Filling out the forms, right? All right. And then we have finance. What are we talking about in finance?
Budget.
Budget. Lack of money. Fundraising. Stewardship. All right. So if each of you just met once a month, then we can see to get from one to the other, if we have multiple stops, it's going to take multiple months to get through to make a decision. Yes? All right. So what if the 4 of you put your name placards down and you sit down? You too. Thank you. But instead, we had a name placard that looks like this. Each person on the team does all the functions. Now, we just talked about a lot of different responsibilities, did we not? But how many of the things have to be repeated in multiple places, those conversations, right? So rather than sitting here with my sole responsibility and the lens that I'm looking at through trustees, instead, I'm going to sit over here and go, I am looking at this holistically for the life of the congregation through finance and trustees and SBR and the overarching council or board. You follow me? So you no longer have 4 separate teams. Instead, we have one team that functions in all 4 places, that meets together once a month. Are we there? Okay. Now, you can sit down. Thank you. Didn't you do a great job, Vanna? Now, one thing that I want you to think through is what we have done in the past is our leadership, those 4 teams, have functioned in a management style rather than a governing style, okay? How many of you are familiar with like a church or a school board model? We have some teachers in the room that go, yeah, okay. All right, so think about the school board. Okay? What does a school board, how does it function? What's their responsibility? All right, some of you had your hands up.
School purpose is to make certain that it carries out what the citizens want, and also to provide
provide what the citizens want and to provide an education for the children. Okay? And they hire principals, superintendent who hires the principals, right? All right? Does the school board hire individual teachers? No. Does the school board decide what curriculum is going to be done on a day-to-day basis in the classrooms? They approve curriculum overall, but they do not do the lesson planning, right? Now, do they approve individual teacher salaries? Probably not, but a general budget for what each building has to spend on personnel, right? Do you think that they are telling the janitor which cleaning products to use? Do you see where I'm going? You see, our typical church is managing the day-to-day operations of the church. And because of that, no one is looking at the big picture of the church. You see, because we're so tied up in the urgency of what's going on, it doesn't allow us to, what I say, climb up onto the balcony and say, are we steering this ship in the right direction? Another metaphor is we have too many people swabbing the decks of the ship and nobody's steering the ship. So in other words, we're just being tossed around by the waves. And we are frustrated that those waves are slopping up on the side, that we're having to swab the decks even more. But you see, if somebody was steering the ship, we would have had the opportunity to maybe steer around that storm or the bumpy weather. That's the biggest shift, folks, is the purpose, the intent, the focus of what this new group could do. So it's not just about putting fewer people around the table, because we can all imagine that happen, amen? But the conversation needs to change when we do it as well, because then it's not only a technical change, but it's the adaptive change to get us back on track of the structure no longer driving our church, but our vision driving our church, the unique way that we make disciples. So let's look specifically at what this structure can look like. All right, now, the first thing I need to unpack is this. Do you see that it says 6 to 9 members at the top? Okay? Do you see anywhere where it says trustees, finance, or SPR representatives? No. Okay? Now, I'll tell you, I've been teaching this for probably about 10 years now. And we used to put right up there saying 2 or 3 SPR reps, 2 or 3 trustee rep, 2 or 3 finance reps. Okay? Because what we had trouble with is wrapping our mind around the function that we used to do. And so who's going to do it? Don't we need to have some responsibility and some point people, right? But here's what's happened in reality. Those 2 or 3 people thought they were the trustee committee. Those 2 or 3 people thought they were the SPR committee. Those 2 or 3 people thought they were the finance committee. They're not. And so we had 2 people happened. We had 2 people fill out the paperwork for the pastor's evaluation and chose to say stay when the rest of the committee were going to say move. You see, because it takes 9 people, book of discipline minimum, to be on staff parish relations. So that's the reason we're moving away from those titles, is because of the function. They tend to function as in the old model, even though we were in the new model. So when you have people on your board, let's call them board members, not trustees, not SPR, not finance. You follow me? If we do, we're going to get ourselves into some trouble or dysfunctionality, right? Everyone that you recruit is all 4. Everyone takes all 4 responsibilities, okay? Now, what we also need to have, though, is one of those people need to be a board chair. So you need a 9 people minimum. And if you've called it council or board before, I don't care what you change it to, change the name. Because if we just continue to call them what we've always called them, it doesn't help us make the transition into we're doing something new. Okay? So first of all, change the name. You'll need a chair. Now, if you're going to run minimum 9, you can add a 10th person as the chair, or one of those 9 could be the chair. You need a lay delegate to annual conference. One of those 9 could be one of those, or you can add a person. Same with a lay leader, okay? If you have a chartered United Methodist Women or a chartered United Methodist Men, they have the opportunity to have representation, okay? But they're put on by nominations as part of the leadership of the board. They are not there to represent United Methodist Women. Does that make sense? So we need to make very sure that they have the right to have someone, but it's not a requirement. If it's not chartered, again, it's not a United Methodist Women, and so that does not apply. Same with United Methodist Women or Men. The other is a youth person. Now, you have to be careful because of the trustee requirements of minimum age to make legal decisions, so sometimes they have to set some things out. But this is not your youth director. Okay, if we are trying to reach people that are young, let's have the truly young people at the table and allow them to have a voice, right? Now, are you ready for this? This is where it really kind of blows people's mind. Best practice. Have your chair be your lay leader, your lay delegate, and the liaison to the district superintendent for purposes of SPR. Follow me? Okay. Best practice is that your chair is also your lay leader, lay delegate, chair of trustees, and SPR liaison to the district superintendent. Now, I know that sounded like a lot, but they're functioning in all those places anyway, friends. The problem is, if you have someone on the team functioning in one of those places, then information and communication comes in from the side rather than the top. So, perfect example. We had an SPR liaison, SPR chair in old language, to the district superintendent who was serving on the new board, but was not the chair. There was conversation going on with the district superintendent that the chair had no idea what was going on. So that way, that information flows in from the top. You see, things are going to be streamlined, so it sounds like a whole lot, but we're just focusing everyone in one common direction. So imagine that your board chair is the one that is hearing from the people in the congregation as lay leader. Or to be thinking that they're the lay delegate, that they're going to go to annual conference and come back as a board chair and a lay leader to be sharing with the congregation what's going on. There's alignment there. So as you begin to think about whether you have been there or are thinking about going into simplified accountable leadership, I wanted to offer you some, maybe a word of caution. Absolutely all churches could and should be practicing accountable leadership model. All churches, regardless of how you're structured. Some churches will want to do simplified structure and accountable leadership. Some. That makes sense for some. But no church should be doing simplified structure without accountable leadership. That's just too dangerous. Now, if you are considering going to this simplified accountable leadership structure, first of all, the Book of Discipline requires that you write a letter to your district superintendent about the intent of moving into that model. And you need to state the missional reason for doing so. The missional reason, folks, is to align your church with the mission of the United Methodist Church to make disciples. All right? Your district superintendent must approve your simplified structure. The next step is need to make sure that all of your key leaders have been trained on the simplified structure with accountable leadership. Please, 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 I beg you, do not go to this model unless all or at least a significant number of your leaders who are going to be practicing it are trained. The problem is if we don't train folks, we put them in a new model and we haven't given them anything else than to practice what they've already practiced in the old model. So you'll get the technical pieces, but you won't get the adaptive pieces. All right? Step 3 is to communicate, and then when you think you've communicated, communicate some more. Please talk about not just what you're going to do, but why you want to do it. They first have to capture the why before they'll go along with the shift of the what. See, that's the problem, is sometimes we start with the what and we never talk about the why. We have to let them know, in order to do this, the reason we're doing this is to be more in alignment, more streamlined, more a mean, lean, disciple-making machine. That's why we want to do this. It's not about, well, we can't get enough people to lead, so we're going to do this. That might be the end result or a benefit, but that cannot be your why. You will need an annual charge conference or church conference to move into your new structure. Okay? The normal rhythm is January through December, so ideally that's when you would do it. Not that some of you haven't or wouldn't do it midterm. But that's the best rhythm, is to do it, charge conference in the fall, so that they start in January. If you move to this model, one of the things you need to understand is everyone in administrative positions, all 4 of those teams, vacate their positions. They're done. So you have to vote all of them out when you are putting the new structure together. So just because you're on trustees currently does not mean you'll be on trustees in the new structure. Some of the trustees may need to go to the building maintenance team. Some need to roll off, right? So each one of you received not only the PowerPoint handout, but there is a separate piece of paper that was under your presentation, and that is frequently asked questions. So be sure you take that with you as well, because those are many times when you get to the board and discussing this, those are the questions that come up. So be sure to take that with you. Then, after you've done all of those steps, then you move into the structure. Right? Sometimes we've done step 5 without perhaps doing steps 1 through 4. Ideally, you would want to move to the new structure, having already been trained, having already started your leadership covenant, begin to think about guiding principles. And the best case scenario is for you to have somebody walk alongside you who is experienced in simplified, accountable structure. So for instance, when I was still doing coaching in individual churches, I would sit with those groups. I'd let them practice 2 or 3 months. And then I'd go back and sit through their board meetings and just say, just leave me about 15 minutes at the end. I'm just going to be a fly on the wall in the meantime. And then at the end, say, here is where we ventured off into our management. Did you all realize that? Here's where, had we had a guiding principle, we wouldn't have spent those 20 minutes, right? So someone who isn't in the game that can kind of set at the parameters and help guide you in that first year to give you a good start. Because sometimes if we don't have that person that can help guide you, then all we do is practice what we've practiced in the old model in the new model, and we get ourselves into some trouble. Does that make sense? And please know that we're putting a network of people to also help, but feel free to call the office Office of Congregational Development is where I'm at. If I can be helpful, please know there's 860 some of you, and there's one of me, but I'll do the best that I can. And like I said, we're building a team to help, but we want to be a resource to you and to be helpful as we can.